31 years of showing up, and it was a cup of coffee that finally made me stop. My name is Gerald Marsh. I'm 63 years old, and I spent the better part of 4 decades being the kind of man nobody writes songs about. Not the hero, not the villain, the foundation, the thing underneath everything that nobody thinks about until it cracks. I lived on Sycamore Ridge Court in Naperville, Illinois. Good suburb, good schools. The kind of neighborhood where everyone has a Ring doorbell and a lawn service and a vague competitive relationship with the house 2 doors down. I drove a 2018 Ford F-150, dark blue, one small dent on the rear quarter panel I kept meaning to fix. I was a licensed structural engineer for 34 years, mostly municipal contracts, bridges, water treatment infrastructure, public works projects across DuPage County. Not glamorous. Not the kind of job that gets mentioned at dinner parties. But every bridge you've ever crossed in the western suburbs of Chicago, there's a reasonable chance I signed off on the load calculations. I retired at 61 with a full pension, solid health care, and a savings account I had been quietly building since before my wife, Diane, and I got married. I want you to understand something about Diane before I tell you the rest of this. When I met her, she was 34 and absolutely brilliant and completely buried. She had a master's degree in business administration from DePaul, genuine talent, and a resume that should have been opening doors. Instead, she was working part-time bookkeeping for a landscaping company in Wheaton because she couldn't pass a standard employment credit check. The debt wasn't her fault, not entirely. A first marriage at 26 to a man who ran up credit cards in both their names and then disappeared. By the time I found her, she was carrying $87,000 in joint debt that wasn't jointly hers, and the financial system didn't care about the distinction. I was 52. I had the savings. I had the credit score. I had the attorney. 3 months before our wedding, I sat across from a financial attorney on Main Street in Wheaton, and I had the debt resolved. Letters sent. Settlements negotiated. Final balance, 0. I handed Diane a printed payoff confirmation at dinner on a Thursday night at a small Italian place on Washington Street. Set it next to her water glass without a word. She read it twice. Then she folded it very carefully, set it down, and looked at me across the table. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Gerald, I don't know how to carry something this big." "You don't have to," I told her. "That's the point." We got married 6 months later. Small ceremony, her sister Patrice, and my brother Ray, a judge friend of mine from the county, dinner at a steakhouse in Lisle. No drama, no production. Just two people deciding to be serious about something. For the first 4 years, everything was exactly what I thought I was building. Diane took a director-level position at a mid-size consulting firm in Oak Brook. Good salary, real career mobility, the kind of role she should have had a decade earlier. I was still working then, and between the two of us we were comfortable in a way she hadn't experienced before. We bought the house on Sycamore Ridge Court. My credit, my down payment, the deed in my name, not because of any strategy, just because the math required it and we both understood that. Then my retirement hit, and something I didn't expect happened. The balance shifted, and Diane noticed the shift, and she liked it. Her title became Vice President of Client Strategy. Her salary crossed into 6 figures and kept climbing. Her name started appearing in the company newsletter, on LinkedIn posts celebrating quarterly wins, in industry publications. She joined 2 professional networks, got invited to a leadership conference in Scottsdale, spoke on a panel about women in consulting. I watched all of it with genuine pride, which is the part that makes what came after so hard to explain to people who weren't in that kitchen. My pension covered the mortgage on Sycamore Ridge Court, property taxes, utilities, insurance mine. I managed the house. I handled every repair, every contractor call, every interaction with the HOA, which in our neighborhood was essentially a part-time administrative position. I cooked 4 nights a week. I kept the cars serviced. On the 3 days a week that our youngest grandson, Tyler, needed pickup from elementary school in Naperville because his parents both worked, I was the one in the carpool line at 3:15 in a Ford F-150 surrounded by minivans. None of this felt like sacrifice. I want to be clear about that. I chose it. I'm a structural engineer. I understand load distribution. I understood exactly what I was carrying, and I carried it deliberately because that's what you do when you love people. But there is a difference between a load you choose and a load somebody stops noticing. The separate accounts came about 2 years after her promotion. It's just cleaner, Diane told me one evening while she was reviewing something on her laptop. For tax purposes, my accountant suggested it. I nodded, said sure. It made sense on paper. What it revealed in practice was that my entire pension was committed before the first of every month, and Diane's income was, as far as our shared life was concerned, entirely her own. She redecorated the living room without mentioning it until the furniture arrived. She booked a 10-day trip to Portugal with her friend Karen from work and told me about it the week before departure. She leased a new Audi Q7, silver, and mentioned it over dinner the way you'd mentioned switching shampoos. I told myself she'd worked hard for it. I told myself I was being rigid about money because of how I was raised. I told myself a lot of things in that house. The first real warning I didn't listen to came from my daughter-in-law, Beth. She pulled me aside at Thanksgiving. We were standing in the kitchen while everyone else was in the living room, and she said, "Gerald, I say this because I love you. You look tired in a way that has nothing to do with sleep." I told her I was fine. She looked at me the way only people who know you well can look at you. "Okay," she said, and she went back to the living room. I should have listened to Beth. The Sunday dinners are when it started coming apart in ways I couldn't keep reframing. Diane had gotten into the habit of having her sister Patrice over on the last Sunday of the month. I didn't mind Patrice. I did mind what the dynamic had quietly become. Diane would talk about her work week, her clients, her upcoming travel, and Patrice would follow along with a kind of breathless enthusiasm that seemed less like sisterly affection and more like audience participation. I cooked those dinners. Every one of them. Set the table, cleared the table, handled the dishes. One evening in February, I was refilling the bread basket when Diane said to Patrice, "Gerald's got the retired life now. No schedule, no pressure. Must be nice." She said it lightly, the way you say something light when you actually mean it. Patrice laughed. "Honestly, Gerald, I don't know what you even do all day." I set the bread basket down. I looked at the two of them at my dining room table in my house. I thought about the $87,000, the deed, the property tax bill I had paid 6 weeks earlier, the oil change I had done on Diane's Audi the previous Thursday because she mentioned it was overdue and then forgot about it. I said nothing. I sat down. I passed the bread, but I filed it. The way you file things when you've been a structural engineer for 34 years, when your entire professional life has been about paying attention to what's quietly changing inside a structure that looks fine from the outside. The morning with the coffee was a Tuesday in March. Cold, overcast, the specific gray of an Illinois March that makes you wonder if spring is actually a real thing or just a concept people made up to stay sane. I had been up since 6. I'd already put in a load of laundry, written a check for the quarterly HOA fee, and called the plumber about the slow drain in the guest bathroom. By the time Diane came downstairs at 7:45, I was standing at the counter finishing my second cup of coffee and reading the Tribune on my tablet. She walked past me to the coffee maker. There was still coffee in the pot. Fresh, hot. I had made it 40 minutes earlier. She looked at it, looked at me, and said, "Is this yours?" "There's plenty," I said. She set the pot down, crossed her arms, and she said something I have replayed in my head every day since, not because it was the worst thing she'd ever said, but because of how completely ordinary her tone was. Like she'd been thinking it for a long time, and had simply run out of reasons not to say it. "Gerald, I need you to start contributing something real to this household. I feel like I'm funding everything while you putter around and call it retirement." The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's car started. I looked at my wife of 11 years. I thought about the Tuesday morning 11 years before when I had handed her a debt payoff confirmation next to a water glass at an Italian restaurant in Wheaton. I thought about the deed in my name, the pension check that hit our mortgage on the first of every month without fail, the Audi I'd had serviced, the grandchild I picked up from school 3 days a week, the Sunday dinners, the HOA fees, the plumber I had called that very morning. I thought about all of it in approximately 5 seconds. And then I said, quietly, "All right, Diane. I hear you." I set my coffee cup in the sink. I walked to my office. I closed the door. I sat at my desk for a long time looking at nothing in particular. I was not angry. I want to be precise about this because it matters. Anger is noise. Anger is something you can sleep off. What I felt sitting at that desk on that Tuesday morning in March was something quieter and more permanent. I felt the very specific clarity of a man who has finally, completely, stopped explaining himself. I opened my laptop. I had a call to make. Her name was Susan Cho, family law attorney, Naperville office, 22 years of practice, former Cook County Family Court mediator. My friend Ray had used her in his own divorce 8 years prior. He had told me once, over beers at a bar in Downers Grove, that Susan Cho was the kind of attorney who did not flinch and did not lose focus and did not allow her clients to make emotional decisions when strategic ones were available. I had her card in my wallet. I don't know exactly when I put it there. Somewhere in the previous 6 months, apparently some part of me had been preparing for a Tuesday morning in March. I was in her office the following Thursday. I brought a folder. Inside that folder was an 11-year paper trail that told a very different story than the one being lived on Diane's LinkedIn profile. The original debt settlement documentation, with my name on every wire transfer. The mortgage deed, solely in my name. 11 years of property tax records. 11 years of insurance premium statements. The pension disbursement records showing exactly where every dollar went the moment it landed. I had also printed Diane's public LinkedIn posts, the conference appearances, the panel discussions, the income milestones she'd announced with the hashtag blessed alongside the Audi lease agreement I had found in the filing cabinet. Susan Cho reviewed the folder with reading glasses and the patience of someone who has long since stopped being surprised by anything a marriage can produce. Then she looked up. "How long have you been operating at a structural deficit to support her discretionary lifestyle?" she asked. I almost smiled. Structural deficit. She had chosen the right language for the right man. "Approximately 4 years," I said. She nodded slowly. She walked me through the Illinois statutes on marital asset division. The house, my premarital credit, my down payment, my name on the deed carried significant documentation supporting a primary asset argument in my favor. The debt I had resolved before the marriage was a premarital contribution that Illinois courts take seriously when it's documented, and mine was documented to the penny. Then she pulled up a calculator. She entered Diane's income. She entered my pension. She ran the state formula. She turned the screen toward me. I kept my face completely neutral. Inside, I felt something shift. Not triumph, not relief. The specific sensation of a long equation balancing. "That's what a support order could look like," Susan said. "Monthly." "How long would this take?" I asked. 90 days, give or take. If she doesn't contest aggressively, she said. "In the meantime, can you go home and behave completely normally? No confrontations? No changes in routine?" I looked at her. "Susan," I said, "I've been behaving normally for 4 years while nobody noticed. A few more months won't be a problem." She did something I don't think she did very often in client meetings. She smiled. "Then let's get to work," she said. "Here is what nobody tells you about carrying a plan like that quietly inside a normal life. The hardest part isn't the legal machinery. Your attorney handles the legal machinery. The hardest part is going home every evening and being exactly the man you have always been, knowing what's coming, while the person across from you has no idea." I did it for 11 weeks. I made breakfast on the mornings I felt like it. I handled the plumber situation. I picked up Tyler from school on my 3 days and took him for ice cream once because he'd gotten a good grade on a spelling test and that felt like a reason. I attended a neighbor's retirement party with Diane, stood next to her, made conversation, drove home. Normal husband at a normal party. There was one evening, about 6 weeks in, when Diane came home from a good day at work and she was warm in a way she hadn't been in a long time. She made tea, sat across from me at the kitchen island, told me about a deal she'd closed, and for about 20 minutes she was the woman from the restaurant in Wheaton, the one who had looked at me across that table and said she didn't know how to carry something that big. I listened. I asked questions. I was present. When she went upstairs, I sat at the kitchen island for a while. I want to be honest with you about that moment, because the story deserves it. I sat there and I asked myself whether I was doing the right thing, whether there was another version of this, whether there was a conversation that could have happened instead of a folder in a lawyer's office. And then I remembered the Tuesday morning in March, the ordinary tone, the coffee pot, the word putter. A man who still had options argues. A man who is finished gets quiet and gets organized. I went to bed. Diane's birthday was the second Saturday in June. She had planned it the way she planned everything that was meant to be witnessed, carefully, visibly, and with a substantial guest list. Her firm's partners had sent a flower arrangement. Patrice was coming, along with Diane's college roommate Sandra, two colleagues from Oak Brook, my son and his wife Beth, and three other couples from the neighborhood. 14 people total, catered brunch, their back patio professionally staged with string lights and a linen runner on the outdoor table. She had mentioned it to me twice, both times while looking at her phone. I told her it sounded lovely. I meant it in ways she didn't understand yet. I had prepared one item the previous Sunday afternoon. A cream-colored gift box, substantial, the kind of packaging that signals that whatever is inside was chosen deliberately. I wrapped it myself at my desk with brown craft paper and a wide green ribbon. Inside was a legal binder, 4 inches thick, organized by tab. I tied the bow 3 times before it sat the way I wanted. I set it on the shelf in my closet and looked at it for a moment. 11 years to make, 30 seconds to open. Happy birthday, Diane. The guests arrived between 11 and noon. Patrice swept in first, the way she always did, moving through the house like she was inspecting it. Sandra arrived with a bottle of rosé and a loud laugh. The neighbors came in couples, the specific comfortable noise of people who see each other regularly enough that conversation doesn't require effort. Beth found me near the kitchen within 5 minutes of arriving. She gave me a hug and then pulled back and looked at my face. "Gerald," she said, quietly. "I'm all right," I said. She studied me for just a moment longer. Then she nodded once and went to say hello to Diane. Beth has always understood me better than most people. I think she suspected something was different that morning, though she said nothing. Good instincts, Beth. She'd earned them. By 12:30 the patio was full. The caterers moved efficiently. Diane was in her element, a cream linen blazer, champagne in hand, moving through her guests the way she moved through a client meeting, purposeful and warm, and fully aware of the room. Patrice walked 3 steps behind her in a dynamic that had always reminded me of a press secretary. "Did I tell you she's being considered for senior VP? Did you see the feature in the industry newsletter? That Audi in the driveway, she negotiated the lease herself." I stood at the edge of the patio with my coffee and watched. My son, Daniel, appeared beside me. He's 38, a high school history teacher in Downers Grove, quiet and thoughtful in the way that makes you realize some things skip a generation and land exactly right. He stood next to me without saying anything for a moment. "You good, Dad?" he said finally. "Better than I've been in a while," I said. He looked at me sideways. He didn't push. He went to go find Tyler, who had been allowed to attend and was currently doing something inadvisable near the flower arrangements. The cream gift box was on the patio table, set apart from the other gifts. I had placed it there at 11. No one had asked about it. People had moved around it, glanced at it, assumed it was what it appeared to be. A gift from a husband to his wife, carefully wrapped, placed with intention. They sang at 1:30. Someone had brought a cake from a bakery in Naperville, 3 layers, buttercream, Diane's name in gold script across the top. The caterers brought it out with candles already lit. The group gathered around, phones up, and sang. I stood in the back. I sang too, softly, every word. Diane closed her eyes. She tilted her chin slightly. She had the expression of someone who has arranged their own celebration and is now performing the receiving of it. There is nothing wrong with enjoying your own birthday. I want to say that clearly. The problem was not the birthday. The problem was 11 years of a specific misunderstanding about who had built the stage she was standing on. The song ended. Applause. Patrice called out, "Speech," in a way that suggested she had been planning to call out, "Speech," for some time. I stepped forward. I was holding the cream gift box. The patio noticed before Diane did. 14 people tracking the retired husband who had been quiet all morning, suddenly moving to the center of the gathering with something in his hands. Daniel lowered his mimosa glass slowly. Beth went still. Diane turned and saw the box. She looked at Patrice. A small smile reflexive. The specific smile of a woman who has spent years expecting very little from a particular direction and has made peace with that expectation. She took the box from me, held it a moment for the group, set it on the table. She pulled the ribbon. She folded back the craft paper carefully, the way people do when they're performing the opening for an audience. She lifted the lid. For about 4 seconds, she looked at what was inside without reacting. The brain does a thing when it receives information it hasn't prepared for. It stalls. It asks the eyes to try again. Then the color left her face. Not gradually, all at once like a tide going out. She lifted the top document with 2 fingers. The petition for dissolution of marriage, State of Illinois, Gerald E. Marsh versus Diane R. Marsh. Below it, a formal asset documentation summary, the house deed, the premarital debt resolution records, 11 years of mortgage and tax payments in my name. Below that, circled in blue ink in Susan Cho's clean, deliberate handwriting, the monthly spousal support calculation, based on the documented income disparity between Diane's vice president salary and my fixed pension. The number was not small. The patio was absolutely silent. The caterers near the beverage table had gone completely still. Then Patrice looked over Diane's shoulder and read enough to understand, and the patio was not silent anymore. "Gerald, what is this on her birthday?" In front of everyone, Patrice's voice had that particular pitch of someone who has spent years preparing to be outraged on behalf of someone else and has finally been given the occasion. "This is humiliating. You planned this? This is who you are?" I turned and looked at Patrice. Her mouth was open and ready. "Patrice," I said, calmly, clearly, "you sat at my dining room table for 4 years and asked me what I did all day. Now you know. I kept the lights on. I kept the roof paid. I kept this family's infrastructure running while your sister's income went to an Audi and a trip to Portugal and a LinkedIn profile about how far she'd come." I paused. "She's come quite far. I helped her get there. The court agrees." Patrice's mouth closed. I turned to Daniel and Beth. Daniel had his arm around Beth. His jaw was set. He was looking at me with an expression I recognized from when he was a teenager and learning that adults were more complicated than he'd wanted them to be. "Son," I said, "I love you. I love Tyler. Nothing about that changes." I held his eyes. "But I need you to understand something you deserve to hear directly from me, not from a conversation someone else has with you later." I spoke to everyone, and to no one in particular. My voice was steady. I had been a structural engineer for 34 years. I knew how to be precise. Before your mother and I were married, I resolved $87,000 in debt that was destroying her credit and closing every professional door she tried to open. I did it quietly, without conditions, because she deserved the chance she hadn't been given. The house we've all been celebrating in today, I bought it. My down payment, my credit, my pension paying the mortgage every single month for 11 years while her income went to things she called her own. I retired so I could be present. For Tyler's school pickups, for this family's daily life. I chose it. I don't regret it. What I won't do any longer is be invisible inside a life I built and then told I'm not contributing anything real. I paused. 3 months ago, in that kitchen, my wife told me I was puttering around while she funded everything. She said it the way you say something you've believed for a long time. So I decided to take her completely at her word. I stopped waiting to be seen. I got organized instead. The patio was very still. I looked at Diane. She was gripping the edge of the outdoor table. The legal binder was open in front of her. She was not crying. She had moved past the place where crying was available. She was standing in the open air of a June afternoon in front of 14 witnesses, holding documentation that was rewriting the story she had been telling about herself and about us. "On a Tuesday morning in March," I said, "you stood in our kitchen and told me to start contributing something real. So I did. I contributed this." I looked at her for one long moment. "Happy birthday, Diane." I walked through the patio doors into the house. My bag was in the front hall closet, packed since Wednesday. One duffel, the documents that mattered, the things with my name on them. I had found a condo on Eagle Street in Naperville 6 weeks prior, 2 bedrooms, a good desk in the second room, the kind of quiet I had not had in a very long time. I'd put down the deposit on a Monday. Signed the lease on Thursday. Told no one. I pulled the bag out of the closet, put on my jacket, stood at the front door. I heard the patio behind me. Patrice's voice. Someone else's low, urgent murmur. The particular noise of a gathering that has become something else entirely. Then footsteps inside the house. Daniel came around the hallway corner. He stopped when he saw me with the bag. Beth was behind him. He looked at me for a long moment. His jaw was still tight. He was working through something. "Dad," he said, "I've been watching you pick Tyler up from school for 3 years. I know what you've been doing." I nodded. "Beth told me," he said, "at Thanksgiving, that you looked tired." "I remember," I said. He came forward and he hugged me. The kind of hug that doesn't need anything added to it. "Call me when you're settled," he said. "I will," I said. "Tell Tyler I'll take him for ice cream on Tuesday." Beth hugged me next. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I opened the front door and walked out into the June afternoon. The street was quiet. A lawn service truck was parked 2 houses down. A neighbor's sprinkler was going in a slow arc across a very green yard. The ordinary Saturday of a neighborhood that had no idea what had just happened inside one of its houses. I loaded the bag into the F-150, sat in the driver's seat for a moment, looked at the house on Sycamore Ridge Court. 11 years of dinners and property taxes and HOA meetings and Tuesday school pickups. A Japanese maple Diane had planted the second spring we lived there, now big enough to give real shade. The side gate I had rehung myself on a July afternoon, while a neighbor leaned over the fence and asked questions about torque specifications. I built something good here. I know that. I don't need to be bitter about it to also know it's done. I started the engine. As I pulled out of the driveway, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Tyler, a text. He had been inside with the other kids during most of it, but I didn't know what he'd overheard. It said, "Grandpa, are we still getting ice cream Tuesday?" I laughed. Actually laughed, alone in my truck on Sycamore Ridge Court, the first time I had laughed at something without thinking about it in longer than I could remember. I typed back, "Tuesday. Your pick." I drove north on Route 59 toward Eagle Street, toward the condo with the good light and the quiet desk and the specific, uncomplicated peace of a man who had stopped waiting for someone else to verify who he was. The sky over DuPage County was the particular blue you only get on a June afternoon when the morning gray burns off and everything sharpens. I turned the radio on low, old country, the kind with real instrumentation. I had the pension, I had the health care. I had the condo on Eagle Street and primary residence documentation and a support order that was going to start arriving monthly, like a very different kind of confirmation letter. I had Tuesday ice cream with my grandson. I had been a structural engineer for 34 years. I understood load-bearing, and I understood failure points, and I understood this above all else. A structure does not fail because of one bad Tuesday morning in March. It fails because of everything that came before it. Every small load that was added without acknowledgement, every inspection that was skipped, every quiet warning that got filed and then ignored. The foundation had simply decided it was done holding up walls that had forgotten what they were standing on. I drove toward Eagle Street. The radio played something with a steel guitar. Somewhere behind me, on a patio on Sycamore Ridge Court, a birthday party was becoming something else entirely, a reckoning, a conversation. The long overdue beginning of an honest accounting. I didn't need to be there for that part. I had already said everything that needed saying. For the first time in a long time, I had nowhere to be except exactly where I was going. And that, if you want to know the truth, felt like more than enough. If you know someone like Gerald, someone who built everything quietly and waited too long to be seen, this story is for them. Hit that like button, leave a comment below, and let me know where you're watching from. And if you want to know what happens 6 weeks later, when Diane shows up at Eagle Street asking to talk, tell me in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.